What astronomers now describe as a discovery that revolutionized our understanding of celestial objects began inside the neglected storm cellar of an expectant mother's farmhouse in rural Oklahoma, all set in motion by one woman's determined effort to secure her family's safety during tornado season. A chance finding that would eventually bring NASA scientists to her doorstep, trigger emergency meetings at major space agencies, and ultimately change our understanding of meteorite classification and origin theories across the scientific community. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The rusty metal doors groaned under Morgan Wheeler's weight as she pulled them open, armed with a flashlight in one hand and a broom in the other. At 33, the pregnant farmer's wife had become surprisingly skilled at property maintenance, an ability born from necessity rather than choice. 5 months into her first pregnancy, with her husband James often working double shifts at the grain elevator to make ends meet, Morgan had taken on many of the farm's daily tasks herself. Their small farm in Clearwater County, Oklahoma had been in James' family for 3 generations, but recent years had brought unprecedented challenges. Severe drought followed by devastating floods had decimated their crops 2 seasons in a row. The mortgage payments loomed large, and with a baby on the way, Morgan felt the pressure mounting daily. This storm cellar needs to be ready before tornado season hits full force, Morgan muttered to herself, shining her flashlight down the concrete steps. The weathered underground shelter, built in the 1950s, had been neglected for years before they inherited the property. Previous owners had used it primarily for storage, and it showed. The space was cluttered with broken farm equipment, moldy cardboard boxes, and various debris that had accumulated over decades. Today's project was part of Morgan's meticulous preparation for their growing family. The local meteorologist had predicted an active tornado season, and with her due date in August, prime severe weather time in Oklahoma, having a functional storm shelter was non-negotiable. She needed this space clean, organized, and safe, with emergency supplies properly stored for any situation. "Morgan, you down there?" James called from above, his voice echoing against the concrete walls. "Just starting the cleanout," she replied, carefully navigating the steps with her expanded midsection. "How was work?" "Same as always," he answered, his tall frame appearing at the cellar entrance, silhouetted against the bright afternoon sky. "You shouldn't be doing this in your condition. I told you I'd handle it this weekend." Morgan smiled despite her fatigue. "Baby's not coming for another 4 months, James. I'm pregnant, not incapacitated. Besides, that big storm system there. Tracking might be here by weekend." James descended the steps, the concern evident on his weathered face. At 35, years of outdoor work had etched fine lines around his eyes and tanned his skin to a permanent bronze. "At least let me help you with the heavy stuff. Dr. Patel said you need to be careful with lifting." "That's why I have this," Morgan said, holding up a reaching tool she'd purchased specifically for this project. "No heavy lifting required. But I won't turn down help sorting through all this junk." Together, they began the methodical process of clearing decades of accumulated items. Most were predictable, broken tools, outdated almanacs, canning jars with contents long since turned to unidentifiable mush. But in the far corner, behind a stack of rusted metal shelving, Morgan noticed something unusual. "What's this?" she asked, directing her flashlight toward what appeared to be a custom-built cabinet that didn't match the utilitarian construction of the rest of the shelter. The wooden structure seemed intentionally concealed, its dark walnut finish dusty, but still visible beneath years of grime. "Never seen that before," James replied, helping her move the shelving unit aside. "Doesn't look like standard storm cellar equipment." The cabinet stood about 4 feet tall, with 2 doors secured by a simple but tarnished brass latch. Unlike the moisture-damaged items surrounding it, The cabinet appeared remarkably well preserved, as if someone had taken special care with its construction and placement. "It looks handmade," Morgan observed, running her fingers along the intricately carved edges. "Really beautiful craftsmanship." A small brass plate was affixed to the top of the cabinet, the engraving partially obscured by years of dust. Morgan gently wiped it clean with her thumb, revealing the words, "Howard J. Lerner, Celestial Collection, 1957 to 1968, Howard Lerner." James repeated thoughtfully, "That name sounds familiar. Wasn't he the previous owner before the Hendersons?" Morgan asked, recalling conversations with neighbors about the farm's history. "The one who was supposedly some kind of amateur scientist?" James nodded slowly. "That's right. Old Mr. Cutler next door mentioned him once. Said he was odd but brilliant. Worked for the government or a university or something before retiring here." Morgan's curiosity was fully engaged now. With careful movements, she tried the brass latch, which resisted briefly before yielding. With a soft click, the doors swung open with surprising smoothness, revealing a series of felt-lined drawers, each labeled with neat handwriting that had faded but remained legible. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Specimens A through E witnessed fall. Clearwater County, May 1957. Read the top. Drawer. Specimens F through J recovered Northwest Field, September 1959. "These are dates and locations," Morgan said, her excitement building. She carefully pulled open the top drawer, revealing 5 compartments, each containing what appeared to be stones of varying sizes, shapes, and colors. But these were unlike any stones Morgan had ever seen. They had unusual textures, some with smooth exteriors that seemed almost glazed, others with distinctive patterns that caught the light in unexpected ways. "James, I think these might be meteorites," she whispered, the significance of their discovery beginning to dawn on her. As a high school science teacher before moving to the farm, Morgan had always maintained her passion for natural sciences. "Look at the fusion crust on this one. That's what happens when they enter the atmosphere." James leaned closer, examining the specimens with growing interest. "Are meteorites valuable?" "Some can be, depending on their type and rarity," Morgan replied, carefully opening the second drawer to reveal more specimens. "But more importantly, they're scientifically valuable, especially if they're well documented with information about when and where they fell." As they continued to explore the cabinet, they found 12 drawers in total, each containing carefully cataloged specimens. In the bottom drawer, they discovered a leather-bound journal, its pages filled with meticulous notes, drawings, and what appeared to be complex calculations. Morgan carefully opened the journal, mindful of its age. The handwriting was precise and scientific, detailing observations about each specimen, including dates, times, and exact coordinates of discovery. Many entries included sketches showing the specimens from multiple angles, with notes about weight, density, and composition. "May 16, 1957, Morgan read aloud. "Witnessed extraordinary meteor shower over northwestern field at approximately 2:17 a.m. Initial impact created ground tremor sufficient to wake me from sleep. Retrieved 5 specimens at first light, all exhibiting unusual properties inconsistent with known classifications. Magnetic anomalies particularly noteworthy in specimens C and E." She turned the page, continuing to read. "Laboratory analysis confirms unusual elemental composition. Traces of elements not consistent with typical meteoritic material. Have sent sample to Dr. Ellison at Northwestern University for verification. Keeping this discovery private until I understand its significance." Further entries documented Lerner's growing excitement and paranoia as he collected more specimens over the years. October 3, 1962. Received letter from NASA requesting information about anomalous meteorite activity in this region. How did they learn of my collection? Have not responded. These specimens may represent something unprecedented in our understanding of cosmic material. Until I complete my analysis, the collection remains my responsibility. February 17, 1965. Government vehicles observed near property perimeter today. Took precaution of relocating primary specimens to secure storage. Will continue research with secondary samples only. The isotopic dating results are challenging all established theories of solar system formation. Morgan looked up from the journal, meeting James' eyes. This is incredible. If these records are accurate, Howard Lerner discovered meteorites with properties that were unknown to science at that time. And it seems NASA was actively looking for them. But why hide them in a storm cellar? James wondered, carefully. Examining one of the larger specimens, a rock about the size of a softball with a distinctive pitted surface. According to his notes, he didn't trust the government's intentions. Morgan replied, continuing to scan the journal entries. He believed the specimens had properties that might be exploited rather than studied properly. As Morgan turned to the final pages of the journal, she found a letter tucked inside the back cover, yellowed with age but preserved in a plastic sleeve. It was dated March 12, 1968, on NASA letterhead, addressed to Howard Lerner. Dear Dr. Lerner, following our previous correspondence regarding meteorite specimens collected in Clearwater County, I must emphasize the scientific importance of your reported findings. If verified, your specimens may represent an unprecedented opportunity to study extraterrestrial material with properties previously unobserved in any known meteorite classification. I assure you that your concerns regarding proper scientific protocol are understood. NASA is prepared to offer you full credit for your discoveries and collaborative research opportunities with our top scientists. The potential implications for our understanding of solar system formation cannot be overstated. Please contact me at your earliest convenience to arrange for proper examination of the specimens. Respectfully, Dr. William H. Morrow, Director, Extraterrestrial Materials Division, NASA Science Directorate. He never responded. Morgan said softly, checking the remaining pages of the journal. The entry stopped just a week after this letter was received. According to what we know, Lerner died in 1969, and the farm was sold to the Hendersons, who probably never discovered this cabinet. James sat back on his heels, running a hand through his hair. So what do we do now? If NASA was looking for these meteorites back then, do you think they'd still be interested? Morgan carefully returned the letter to its place in the journal, her mind racing with possibilities. As a science educator, she understood the potential significance of well-preserved meteorite specimens with unusual properties. But she also felt a strange connection to Howard Lerner and his careful private cataloging of his discoveries. I think we need more information before we decide, she said finally. These specimens have been hidden for over 50 years. A few more days won't matter. I'd like to read through this journal completely and maybe do some research on Lerner and these types of meteorites. James nodded, respecting his wife's thoughtful approach. That makes sense. But maybe we should keep this between us for now. At least until we know what we're dealing with. Morgan agreed, and they carefully closed the cabinet, deciding to move it upstairs to their home office where Morgan could examine the contents more thoroughly in comfort. Despite her pregnancy, Morgan insisted on helping, guiding James as he maneuvered the surprisingly heavy cabinet up the narrow cellar stairs. That evening, after dinner, while James tackled the farm's monthly accounts at the kitchen table, Morgan settled in their small home office with Lerner's journal and her laptop. She began by researching Howard J. Lerner himself, discovering that he had indeed been a respected physicist who worked for the government during the space race era before mysteriously retiring to rural Oklahoma in 1956. Several scientific publications, from the early 1950s listed him as lead author on papers regarding cosmic radiation and meteorite classification. His sudden departure from academic life had apparently puzzled his colleagues, with one biography noting that Lerner's retreat from scientific community at the height of his career remains unexplained. Next, Morgan researched meteorite classification, familiarizing herself with standard categories, iron, stone, and stony iron, and their typical characteristics. Based on Lerner's descriptions, several of his specimens didn't fit neatly into established classifications, particularly those he described as having anomalous magnetic properties and unexplained elemental signatures. As midnight approached, Morgan reluctantly closed the journal, her mind buzzing with questions. The baby kicked, as if sharing her excitement about their discovery. "I think you've done enough research for tonight," James said gently from the doorway. "You and Junior need rest." Morgan smiled, placing a hand on her rounded belly. "We don't know it's a junior yet. Either way, both of you need sleep," James insisted, helping her up from the desk chair. As she prepared for bed, Morgan couldn't stop thinking about the meteorites and their mysterious collector. Howard Lerner had dedicated years to studying these specimens, believing them important enough to hide from authorities. Now, 5 decades later, his collection had been entrusted to them through chance and circumstance. "What would you do?" she asked James as they lay in bed, the spring wind whistling around the farmhouse eaves. "About the meteorites?" he clarified, turning to face her in the darkness. "Yes, if they're scientifically valuable, shouldn't they be studied?" But then again, Lerner went to great lengths to keep them private. James was quiet for a moment. "I think we need to understand why he hid them before we decide what to do. He was a scientist, right? Scientists typically want their discoveries known, not hidden away." Morgan nodded in the darkness. "That's what bothers me too." "What did he discover that made him so protective of these meteorites?" With that question hanging between them, they drifted into sleep, the cabinet of celestial treasures waiting patiently across the hall, just as it had waited in darkness for over 50 years. The next morning, Morgan woke early, drawn back to Lerner's journal before even making breakfast. One particular entry caught her attention. Dated September 3, 1963, specimen K continues to demonstrate unexplained properties. When placed in proximity to electronic equipment, disruption occurs, compass needles deviate, radio signals experience interference. Most concerning is the apparent increase in these effects over time. The specimen appears to be changing, though no visible alteration can be detected. If this property exists in all the specimens, the implications are profound. Morgan glanced toward the cabinet, wondering if she should test this observation. Scientific curiosity battled with caution, especially given her pregnancy. If these meteorites did emit some kind of radiation or electromagnetic field, perhaps handling them wasn't wise in her condition. She decided to proceed with minimal direct contact, using kitchen tongs to carefully remove specimen K from its felt-lined compartment. Following Lerner's notes, she placed it near an old transistor radio tuned to a local station. Almost immediately, the clear signal degraded to static. When she moved the specimen away, the signal returned to normal. "James," she called, excitement overcoming caution. "You need to see this." James hurried in from the barn, where he'd been repairing equipment. Morgan demonstrated the effect again, moving the meteorite near and then away from the radio. "That's not normal," James stated, watching the demonstration with growing concern. "Should you be handling that thing? What if it's radioactive or something?" Lerner's notes don't indicate radiation, just electromagnetic interference, Morgan replied, though she carefully returned the specimen to its drawer using the tongs. "But you're right, we should be cautious. I think it's time to consult an expert." "NASA?" James suggested, recalling the letter they'd found. Morgan shook her head. "Not yet. Let's start with someone local, someone with scientific credentials, but no government ties. I'm thinking Dr. Eleanor Chen at Central Oklahoma University. She was my mentor during my teaching degree, and she specializes in geophysics. Can we trust her? James asked, his farmer's natural caution showing through. If anyone would appreciate the scientific importance while respecting our position. As the finders, it's Dr. Chen, Morgan assured him. Plus, she has equipment that could analyze these specimens properly without requiring us to hand them over. After some discussion, they agreed that Morgan would contact Dr. Chen without revealing the full extent of their discovery, simply requesting a confidential consultation about potentially unusual meteorite specimens. To their relief, Dr. Chen responded quickly, offering to meet them at their farm the following day. That night, a severe thunderstorm rolled across the plains, the kind that often preceded tornado season in Oklahoma. As lightning illuminated their bedroom in brilliant flashes, Morgan lay awake, one hand resting on her growing belly, the other holding her phone as she continued research in meteorites with unusual properties. One article particularly caught her attention: the hunt for the Clearwater anomalies, NASA's unfinished search. Published in a scientific journal just 3 years earlier, it referenced a collection of meteorites reported in Clearwater County during the 1960s that had demonstrated properties inconsistent with known cosmic material. According to the article, NASA had investigated reports but never located the specimens, which some scientists theorized might represent material from outside our solar system. The article concluded, while many dismiss the Clearwater anomalies as scientific legend, declassified NASA documents confirm the agency's sustained interest in locating these specimens, which, if they exist, could revolutionize our understanding of extraterrestrial material. Morgan stared at her screen in disbelief. The meteorites in their farm office, Lerner's carefully hidden collection, were apparently still being sought by scientists decades after their discovery. This wasn't just an interesting find, it was potentially groundbreaking. The storm intensified, rain lashing against the windows as Morgan continued reading related articles. She discovered that in recent years, interest in the Clearwater anomalies had increased following new theories about interstellar objects entering our solar system. The 2017 discovery of Oumuamua, the first confirmed interstellar object detected passing through our solar system, had renewed scientific interest in potential interstellar material that might have reached Earth's surface. A loud crack of thunder startled Morgan from her research. Beside her, James stirred. "Can't sleep?" he murmured, reaching for her hand in the darkness. "I found something," she whispered, showing him the article about the Clearwater anomalies. "These meteorites Lerner collected, they're actually famous in scientific circles. Or infamous, maybe. Scientists have been looking for them for decades." James sat up, suddenly fully awake. "So they're valuable?" "Scientifically priceless," Morgan confirmed. "And we need to be careful about how we proceed. The more I learn, the more I understand why Lerner might have hidden them." James glanced toward their office across the hall, where the unassuming cabinet held what might be one of the most significant scientific collections in recent history. "I guess tomorrow's meeting with Dr. Chen just got a lot more complicated." The storm continued through the night, finally breaking just before dawn. Morgan and James, having slept little, began preparing for Dr. Chen's visit. They decided to show her only 3 specimens initially, along with copies of selected journal entries, keeping the full extent of the collection private until they could gauge her reaction. Dr. Eleanor Chen arrived precisely at noon, her compact frame and energetic movements belying her 65 years. Her silver-streaked black hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and she carried a case of scientific equipment that suggested she had come prepared for serious analysis. "Morgan, it's wonderful to see you," she greeted her former student warmly before nodding respectfully to James. Though I must admit, your message has me intensely curious. You mentioned unusual meteorite specimens. Morgan led her to the kitchen table, where they had placed the 3 selected specimens on clean white cloths. We found these while cleaning out our storm cellar, she explained, not yet mentioning Lerner or the cabinet. Based on my limited knowledge, they seem to have unusual properties. Dr. Chun's demeanor changed instantly upon seeing the specimens, her friendly smile replaced by intense scientific focus. She donned latex gloves and carefully examined each one, occasionally murmuring to herself, "May I?" she asked, gesturing to her equipment case. At Morgan's nod, she removed several instruments and began preliminary tests, measuring density, magnetic response, and surface characteristics. After nearly 30 minutes of silent work, Dr. Chun looked up, her expression a mixture of excitement and disbelief. "Where exactly did you say you found these?" Morgan exchanged a glance with James before deciding to trust her mentor with more information. They were part of a larger collection, hidden in our storm cellar for decades. They belonged to the previous owner of this farm, Howard Lerner. Dr. Chun's eyes widened. Howard Lerner? The physicist who... She trailed off, staring at the specimens with newfound intensity. "Morgan, do you know what these might be?" "We have some idea," Morgan admitted, showing her the article about the Clearwater anomalies. "We believe these may be the meteorites NASA has been searching for since the 1960s. Dr. Chun sat back, removing her glasses and pinching the bridge of her nose. "If that's true, what you have here isn't just unusual, it's potentially revolutionary. These specimens exhibit characteristics I've never seen in terrestrial or known meteoritic material." "What kind of characteristics?" James asked, leaning forward. "For one, the magnetic properties are extraordinary. This specimen," she indicated the largest of the 3, "demonstrates magnetic field fluctuations that shouldn't be possible based on its apparent composition. And the density readings are inconsistent with any known meteorite class." She looked directly at Morgan. "If these are indeed Lerner's Clearwater anomalies, they've been the subject of scientific speculation for decades. Some theorize they might be the first confirmed samples of interstellar material to reach Earth, cosmic objects from beyond our solar system." The significance of their discovery was beginning to sink in for both Morgan and James. This wasn't just an interesting scientific curiosity. It was potentially a find that could change our understanding of the cosmos. "What should we do?" Morgan asked, unconsciously resting a hand on her pregnant belly. Dr. Chun considered the question carefully. "That depends on what you want. These specimens have immense scientific value and should be studied. But as the discoverers, you have certain rights." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "However, I should warn you that once word gets out about this find, you'll face intense interest from multiple parties, scientific institutions, private collectors, and yes, government agencies like NASA who have been searching for these specimens for decades." "We found Lerner's journal," Morgan revealed, sliding across the selected photocopied pages. "He seemed to believe these meteorites had properties that might be exploited rather than studied properly. That's why he hid them." Dr. Chun reviewed the journal excerpts, her expression growing increasingly troubled. "These observations are extraordinary. If accurate, Lerner documented properties that defy our current understanding of cosmic material." She looked up at them. "I understand your caution now." Lerner wasn't just being paranoid. He was protecting a discovery that was too significant to risk misuse. "So what do we do?" James repeated Morgan's earlier question. Dr. Chun thought for a moment. "I can help you authenticate these properly, using university equipment without attracting immediate attention. That would give you scientific verification before approaching larger institutions." She continued, "But I think you need legal advice as well. Discoveries of this nature often become complicated regarding ownership, study rights, and proper credit." As they discussed next steps, the distinctive sound of vehicles on gravel interrupted their conversation. James moved to the window, peering out through the curtains. "We have company," he announced, his voice tense. Two black SUVs coming up the drive. Morgan joined him at the window, watching as the vehicles stopped in front of their farmhouse. 4 individuals emerged, 3 men and 1 woman, all dressed in professional attire that seemed out of place in rural Oklahoma. "Any idea who they are?" she asked, feeling a sudden protectiveness over Lerner's collection. "None," James replied, "but they look official." Dr. Chun had joined them at the window, her expression grim. "This is happening faster than it should," she murmured. "Did either of you contact anyone else about the meteorites?" "No one," Morgan insisted. "We've only discussed this with you." A troubling thought occurred to her. "But I've been researching online, articles about the Clearwater anomalies, Lerner's work, unusual meteorites. Could someone be monitoring those search terms?" Dr. Chun nodded slowly. "It's possible. Certain scientific topics, especially those with government interest, might trigger alerts." The lead visitor, a tall woman with close-cropped gray hair, approached the front door and knocked firmly. James looked to Morgan, who nodded her assent to answer. "Good afternoon," the woman greeted them with professional courtesy. "I'm Dr. Valerie Simmons, senior researcher with NASA's Meteorite Working Group. We're hoping to speak with the residents about a matter of scientific interest." James hesitated at the door, his protective instinct kicking in. He glanced back at Morgan, who stood frozen in the kitchen, Dr. Chun beside her. The 3 specimens they had been examining still lay on the table, impossible to hide quickly. "May I ask how we can help NASA?" James asked, not yet opening the screen door fully. "We're just farmers," Dr. Simmons smiled politely. "We have reason to believe your property may be of scientific interest. Our agency has historical records suggesting that unique meteorite specimens were documented in this area during the 1950s and 60s. We're following up on that research." The precision of their timing was too coincidental to ignore. Morgan stepped forward, making a quick decision to take control of the situation rather than appear defensive. "Please come in," she offered, her teacher's composure taking over despite her racing heart. "I'm Morgan Wheeler. This is my husband James, and this is Dr. Eleanor Chun from Central Oklahoma University." Dr. Simmons looked surprised at the mention of Dr. Chun, clearly not expecting to encounter another scientist. She introduced her colleagues, Dr. Marcus Reed, a geophysicist, Trevor Dawson, a legal specialist, and Daniel Foster, security coordinator for special collections. The presence of both legal and security personnel confirmed Morgan's suspicions that this was no routine scientific inquiry. This was a recovery mission. "What an interesting coincidence," Morgan continued, deciding on a direct approach. We're just discussing some unusual stones we found while cleaning out our storm cellar." Dr. Simmons exchanged glances with her colleagues. "Mrs. Wheeler, I believe in transparency. Our agency has been searching for the Clearwater anomalies for over 50 years. These meteorite specimens were documented by physicist Howard Lerner, but disappeared after his death. Recent data analytics flagged search patterns consistent with someone researching these specific specimens." She looked directly at Morgan. "That would be you, I presume." "I've been researching meteorites," Morgan acknowledged, resting a hand protectively on her pregnant belly. "Our farm previously belonged to Dr. Lerner, and we found some interesting stones. Dr. Chun was kind enough to examine them for us." Dr. Reed stepped forward, his attention drawn to the specimens on the kitchen table. "May I?" he asked, already reaching for his glasses. Before Morgan could respond, Dr. Chun smoothly intervened. "As the consulting scientist currently analyzing these specimens, I'd be happy to discuss preliminary findings with colleagues. However, These items were discovered by the Wheelers on their private property, and proper protocols should be observed. The subtle reminder of ownership created a momentary tension. Trevor Dawson, the legal specialist, cleared his throat. Of course, we recognize the rights of property owners in such discoveries. NASA isn't here to confiscate anything. We're interested in scientific collaboration regarding specimens that may have extraordinary research value. Morgan wasn't entirely convinced. "Please, let's all sit down," she suggested, guiding everyone to the farmhouse's modest living room. As James offered refreshments, a rural courtesy that seemed to momentarily disorient the NASA team, Morgan quickly whispered to Dr. Chun, "How should we handle this?" "Carefully," Dr. Chun murmured back. "Acknowledge what they already know, but don't volunteer information about the full collection yet." Once everyone was settled, Dr. Simmons began a more detailed explanation of NASA's interest. The meteorites Howard Lerner documented in the 1960s potentially represent a unique classification of extraterrestrial material. Based on his limited communications with our predecessors, these specimens may have originated from outside our solar system, what we now call interstellar objects. She leaned forward, her professional demeanor softening slightly. "Mrs. Wheeler, Mr. Wheeler, if you've indeed found Lerner's collection, you've rediscovered specimens that could revolutionize our understanding of cosmic material. The scientific community has been seeking these for decades. What exactly makes these meteorites so special?" James asked, maintaining his practical farmer's skepticism. Dr. Reed eagerly took up this question. Lerner's notes described properties inconsistent with any known meteorite classification. Unusual magnetic behavior, unexplained elemental signatures, and most intriguingly, evidence of what he called progressive modification, changes in the specimens over time. Morgan thought of Lerner's journal entries describing exactly these properties, particularly the note about specimen K affecting electronic equipment. If verified, Dr. Reed continued, these could be the first confirmed samples of interstellar material to reach Earth, cosmic visitors from beyond our solar system, carrying information about distant star systems. The significance hung in the air. Morgan exchanged glances with James, a silent communication passing between them. They needed to make decisions that respected both scientific progress and their responsibility as the discoverers. "We have found some unusual stones," Morgan acknowledged carefully. "And we've located Dr. Lerner's journal documenting his collection. We're still processing what all this means. Would you be willing to show us the journal?" Dr. Simmons asked, unable to hide her excitement. Morgan hesitated, then nodded to James, who retrieved the photocopied pages they had prepared for. "Dr. Chun, no need to reveal they possess the original journal just yet." As the NASA scientists eagerly reviewed the pages, Morgan noticed Daniel Foster, the security coordinator, scanning the room with professional attention. His gaze lingered on the hallway leading to their home office, where the cabinet containing the full collection remained. "These are consistent with Lerner's communications from the 1960s, Dr. Simmons confirmed, looking up from the pages. "Mrs. Wheeler, would you be willing to allow our team to conduct preliminary tests on the specimens you found? We've brought specialized equipment that can provide immediate analysis without damaging the samples." The request seemed reasonable, but Morgan felt the need to establish boundaries. "We're open to scientific collaboration," she said carefully, "but we want to understand our rights in this situation. These specimens were found on our property, and we feel a responsibility to ensure they're handled appropriately." Trevor Dawson, the legal specialist, nodded. "That's completely understandable. Legally, meteorites found on private property generally belong to the landowner. However, discoveries of extraordinary scientific significance sometimes involve more complex considerations, such as," James prompted. "Scientific access, proper preservation, research rights," Dawson elaborated. "NASA isn't claiming ownership. We're proposing collaboration that respects your rights as discoverers, while ensuring these potentially groundbreaking specimens contribute to scientific knowledge. Dr. Chun, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. Perhaps a reasonable next step would be limited scientific verification. The Wheelers could allow basic, non-destructive testing to confirm whether these are indeed the specimens NASA has been seeking, while maintaining physical possession. This compromise seemed sensible. Morgan and James agreed to allow the NASA scientists to examine the 3 specimens already on display, with Dr. Chun overseeing the process to ensure the Wheelers' interests were protected. As Dr. Reed and Dr. Simmons set up their equipment on the kitchen table, Morgan pulled Dr. Chun aside. "Should we tell them about the entire collection?" she whispered. "Not yet," Dr. Chun advised quietly. "Let's see their preliminary analysis and proposed terms first. Once they confirm the scientific significance, you'll be in a stronger position to negotiate proper credit and research participation." The testing process was fascinating to watch. Dr. Reed used instruments far more sophisticated than Dr. Chun's. University equipment, including a portable spectroscope that could analyze elemental composition without damaging the specimens. As the readings appeared on his tablet, Dr. Reed's professional composure gave way to undisguised excitement. "These signatures are extraordinary," he murmured, almost to himself. "Elements and combinations that don't occur naturally in our solar system. And the isotope ratios." He looked up at Dr. Simmons, who had been watching over his shoulder. "It's them. These are the clear water anomalies." The confirmation sent a ripple of energy through the room. Even the previously stoic security coordinator seemed affected by the scientific breakthrough unfolding in this ordinary farmhouse kitchen. Dr. Simmons turned to Morgan and James, her professional demeanor barely containing her excitement. "Mr. and Mrs. Wheeler, I cannot overstate the significance of what you've discovered. These specimens represent a truly historic scientific find. What exactly are they?" James asked, now genuinely curious despite his initial skepticism. "Based on our preliminary analysis, these are indeed fragments of an interstellar object, material that originated outside our solar system," Dr. Simmons explained. "The elemental composition and isotope ratios are inconsistent with anything from our own cosmic neighborhood." Dr. Reed added, "Until now, we've only been able to observe interstellar objects passing through our solar system from a distance. Having physical samples to study is unprecedented." Morgan felt a growing sense of responsibility. What had begun as a simple cleanup of their storm cellar had led to a discovery with profound scientific implications. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Ideally, we would transport these specimens to NASA facilities for comprehensive analysis." Dr. Simmons began, but Morgan immediately shook her head. "I'm not comfortable with that, at least not yet," she stated firmly. "We need time to consider our options and understand the full significance of what we've found." To her surprise, it was Trevor Dawson who supported her position. "Mrs. Wheeler's caution is appropriate. Discoveries of this magnitude deserve careful consideration regarding handling and attribution." Dr. Simmons looked disappointed but nodded in understanding. "Of course. Would you at least consider allowing us to take small samples for further analysis? Microscopic amounts that wouldn't affect the integrity of the specimens." Before Morgan could respond, James asked the practical question that had been on both their minds. "What's the value of these meteorites? Not just scientifically, but financially?" The question created a momentary awkwardness among the NASA representatives. Trevor Dawson finally addressed it. "That's complex. Scientifically, they're priceless. Financially, unusual meteorites can be valuable in the collector market, but these would be in a category of their own. However, I should note that specimens with significant scientific importance sometimes become subject to preservation regulations." Morgan understood the implication. these meteorites might be too important to remain entirely under private control. Yet she also knew that as the discoverers, she and James had certain rights that needed protection. "I think we need some time," she said finally. "This is a lot to process. We're willing to collaborate with NASA, but we want legal advice to ensure our rights as discoverers are respected." Dr. Simmons seemed about to protest, but instead nodded professionally. "We understand. Scientific discoveries of this magnitude involve complex considerations. We can provide resources regarding precedents for similar situations." As the NASA team packed up their equipment, Dr. Chun quietly suggested to Morgan that they should document everything that had occurred. "Record-keeping will be crucial moving forward," she advised. "And I recommend consulting a specialist in scientific discovery rights as soon as possible." Just as the NASA representatives were preparing to leave, Morgan felt the baby kick, a strong, determined movement that somehow crystallized her thoughts. This discovery wasn't just about science or potential financial gain. It was about responsibility to knowledge itself. Howard Lerner had protected these specimens for a reason, ensuring they wouldn't be exploited or hidden away from scientific scrutiny. "Dr. Simmons," Morgan called, making a sudden decision. "There's something else you should know." Despite James' questioning look, Morgan continued. "The 3 specimens you've examined are only part of what we found. There's a complete collection, Lerner's entire catalog of meteorites, along with his original research journal." The revelation visibly stunned the NASA team. Dr. Simmons struggled to maintain her professional composure. "A complete collection? How many specimens?" "Dozens," Morgan replied. "All carefully cataloged and preserved by Dr. Lerner until his death." "Why tell us now?" Dr. Reed asked, genuinely curious. Morgan placed a protective hand on her belly. "Because I believe in scientific progress. These specimens should be studied, not hidden away. But I also believe in responsible stewardship. If we're going to collaborate, it needs to be with complete transparency and mutual respect." Dr. Simmons nodded slowly, a new appreciation evident in her expression. "That's remarkably principled, Mrs. Wheeler. Many people would have kept that information private until forced to reveal it." "We're not looking to profit from science," Morgan clarified. "But we do want proper recognition of our role in this discovery, and assurances that the collection will be used for genuine scientific advancement, not disappeared into some classified government project." Trevor Dawson stepped forward. "I think we can certainly work within those parameters. NASA has established protocols for crediting discoverers and ensuring public scientific access." They agreed that the NASA team would return the following day after. Morgan and James had time to consult with legal representation. Dr. Chun offered to stay with them overnight to help document the full collection and provide scientific guidance. After the NASA representatives departed, James turned to Morgan with a mixture of surprise and admiration. "That was quite a revelation at the end there. Are you sure it was the right move?" Morgan nodded, feeling more certain than she had about any decision in recent memory. Lerner hid these meteorites because he feared they wouldn't be studied properly or that the knowledge would be restricted. Times have changed. Public scientific collaboration is more transparent now. I think the right approach is to ensure proper study while maintaining enough control to guarantee the results are shared with the world." Dr. Chun smiled approvingly. "A wise decision, and strategically sound. By voluntarily disclosing the full collection, you've established good faith and strengthened your position as responsible discoverers." That evening, after calling a lawyer specializing in scientific discoveries, who agreed to join them the next morning, they carefully moved the entire cabinet to the living room. One by one, they examined each drawer, photographing and documenting every specimen alongside its corresponding journal entry. The full magnitude of Lerner's collection was even more impressive than they had initially realized. Beyond the basic specimens were specialized containers holding what Lerner described as progressive samples, the same meteorite fragment documented over months or years, showing subtle changes in properties that defied conventional understanding. This is why they've been searching for so long, Dr. Chun observed, examining Lerner's detailed notes. He documented properties that challenge fundamental assumptions about extraterrestrial material, particularly the idea that meteorites are static, unchanged remnants of cosmic events. As Morgan photographed a particularly striking specimen with iridescent blue patterns within a charcoal-colored matrix, she noticed something in Lerner's journal she hadn't seen before, a loose page tucked between entries, written in a more personal tone than his scientific observations. These visitors from beyond our solar neighborhood carry more than just scientific information. They carry possibility. The progressive changes I've documented suggest adaptation to Earth's environment, a characteristic previously associated only with biological materials. I protect these specimens not from science, but for science, until we can approach such discoveries with wisdom equal to our curiosity. Morgan read the note aloud to James and Dr. Chun, feeling a connection to the long-deceased scientist who had hidden these treasures beneath their farm. His concerns weren't born of paranoia, but of profound scientific responsibility, a realization that some discoveries require not just analysis, but philosophical preparation. He was ahead of his time, Dr. Chun commented. The scientific community is only now seriously considering the possibility of panspermia, the idea that life or its precursors might travel between star systems via meteorites or comets. James, who had been quietly observing, suddenly spoke up. So these rocks might actually be alive, or something like it. Not alive in the conventional sense, Dr. Chun clarified, but possibly demonstrating properties that blur the boundaries between what we consider organic and inorganic processes. If Lerner's observations are accurate, these specimens may be responding to Earth's environment in ways that normal meteorites simply don't. The implications were staggering. Morgan thought about the NASA team returning tomorrow, their eagerness to study the collection. We need to ensure these are studied openly, she said firmly. No classified research, no restricted access. Lerner wanted these protected until science was ready for them. I think that time has come, but we need guarantees. They worked late into the night, preparing a comprehensive inventory and developing specific conditions for scientific access, including requirements for open publication, proper crediting, and non-destructive testing protocols. Their lawyer, when consulted by phone, approved of their approach and suggested additional protections they could implement. As midnight approached, Morgan finally acknowledged her exhaustion, the baby's movements reminding her of the personal reality alongside this scientific discovery. As James helped her to bed, she paused at the doorway, looking back at Lerner's cabinet and the treasures it contained. It's strange to think about, she murmured. These pieces traveled through interstellar space, possibly for millions of years, only to end up hidden in our storm cellar. And now they might change how we understand the universe. James wrapped an arm around her shoulders, and it took someone cleaning out a storm cellar to bring them to light. Sometimes the biggest discoveries happen during the most ordinary tasks. Morgan smiled, leaning against him. I wonder what Lerner would think, knowing his collection will finally be studied the way he hoped. I think he'd approve of how you've handled it, James replied. You're making sure they're protected and studied responsibly. That seems to be what he wanted. As they prepared for bed, a spring storm began building outside, thunder rumbling in the distance. Morgan felt the symmetry of the moment, a storm approaching, just as when Lerner had first discovered these cosmic visitors decades ago. Nature's power providing backdrop to a discovery that transcended earthly origins. Tomorrow would bring NASA scientists back to their door, beginning a process that would likely change their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. But tonight, in their farmhouse on the Oklahoma plains, Morgan felt a profound sense of purpose. They had become unexpected custodians of knowledge that could transform humanity's understanding of our place in the cosmos. As she drifted toward sleep, her hand resting protectively over her unborn child, Morgan thought about connections between stars and planets, between past and future, between one scientist who had hidden these treasures and another yet to be born who might someday understand them fully. The storm cellar, intended to protect them from earthly dangers, had instead revealed cosmic wonders that would soon belong to all of humanity. Morning arrived with the clarity that often follows spring storms in Oklahoma. The sky was a perfect, washed blue, as if the thunderstorms had scrubbed away all impurities. Morgan stood at the kitchen window, a mug of herbal tea warming her hands as she watched the sunrise gild their modest farmland. The fields James had painstakingly prepared for planting glistened with dew, the soil dark and rich after the rain. It was the kind of morning that normally filled her with quiet contentment about their life choices. The decision to take over James's family farm, despite the financial challenges. The choice to start their family here, connected to the land. Today, however, her mind was elsewhere, focused on the cabinet of cosmic treasures, now sitting in their living room, and the NASA team scheduled to return in just a few hours. Her hand automatically moved to her rounded belly as the baby shifted within. What world would this child grow up in? Would the discoveries hidden in Howard Lerner's collection fundamentally change our understanding of the universe during her child's lifetime? "You're up early," James observed, coming up behind her and gently placing his hands on her shoulders. "Couldn't sleep?" "Too much going through my mind," Morgan admitted. "Part of me still can't believe this is happening. Yesterday, we were just farmers trying to prepare for tornado season. Today we're negotiating with NASA about potentially groundbreaking extraterrestrial materials." James smiled, pouring himself coffee from the pot she'd brewed. "Life has a way of surprising you. Remember when that tornado took out the West Field fence last year, and we found those arrowheads while rebuilding it?" Morgan nodded, recalling how excited they'd been about those simple stone tools, carefully preserving and displaying them in their modest collection of farm artifacts. How trivial that seemed compared to their current discovery. Those indigenous artifacts connected us to this land's human history, Morgan reflected. Now we're dealing with objects that connect us to cosmic history. The scale just keeps expanding. Their morning routine was interrupted by the arrival of Catherine Emerson, the attorney specializing in scientific discoveries whom they had contacted the previous evening. She arrived precisely at 7:30 a.m., exactly as promised, her professional appearance somewhat at odds with the rural farmhouse setting. "I reviewed your documentation and preliminary agreement terms," she announced after introductions, wasting no time as she spread papers across their kitchen table. "You've taken an excellent approach by establishing clear conditions for scientific access, while maintaining your rights as discoverers." Dr. Chun joined them from the guest room where she had spent the night, and together they refined the agreement. Terms before the NASA team's expected arrival at 10 a.m., the attorney was particularly focused on ensuring proper attribution and establishing a framework for potential future benefits resulting from the discovery. Scientific discoveries of this magnitude often lead to publications, grants, patents on testing methods, and occasionally commercial applications, Emerson explained. "While your primary motivation may be ensuring scientific progress, it's my job to protect your interests in any developments that emerge from this find." As they worked, Morgan found herself increasingly drawn to Howard Lerner's journal, particularly his more philosophical entries. One passage especially resonated with her. "Science without conscience is merely the ruin of the soul," as Rabelais noted centuries ago. These specimens from beyond our solar neighborhood raise profound questions about our place in the cosmos. Are we unique? Are the boundaries between living and non-living systems more fluid than we've imagined? The answers require not just scientific instruments but wisdom and humility. Morgan shared the passage with the others. I feel like we have a responsibility not just to the specimens, but to learners' vision for how they should be studied. That's becoming increasingly clear, Dr. Chun agreed. He wasn't hiding these materials out of paranoia or selfishness. He was protecting them until humanity could approach them with the right perspective. Attorney Emerson added a clause to their agreement specifically addressing ethical research protocols, ensuring that studies would consider broader implications beyond mere technical analysis. Shortly before 10 a.m., they heard vehicles approaching on the gravel drive. The NASA team had returned, this time with additional personnel and what appeared to be more sophisticated equipment in a small trailer. Attached to one of the SUVs, Dr. Simmons led the group, which now included Dr. Reed and Trevor Dawson from the previous day, along with 3 new scientists introduced as specialists in meteoritics, astrochemistry, and exobiology, the study of potential life beyond Earth. The addition of an exobiologist suggested NASA was taking learners' observations about progressive changes in the specimens very seriously. Morgan introduced Attorney Emerson, whose presence created a momentary tension. Dr. Simmons recovered quickly, however, acknowledging the reasonable need for legal representation given the significance of the discovery. We've prepared a comprehensive examination protocol, Dr. Simmons explained as her team began setting up equipment. With your permission, we'd like to conduct non-destructive analysis of the complete collection, documenting each specimen's properties before discussing next steps. Morgan nodded, but Attorney Emerson smoothly interjected. Before proceeding, we should review and formalize the terms under which this examination is taking place. The NASA legal specialist, Trevor Dawson, stepped forward to engage with Emerson. Their discussion was professional but intense, focusing on attribution rights, research access, and public disclosure requirements. Morgan was impressed by how effectively Emerson advocated for their interests, insisting on complete transparency in all research findings and guaranteed credit as the discoverers in any publications. After nearly an hour of negotiation, they reached an agreement that satisfied all parties. The Wheelers would retain formal recognition as the official discoverers, with rights to approve or deny any destructive testing. NASA would have primary research access, but would be required to share all findings with the broader scientific community through peer-reviewed publications. A small portion of any grants or research funding related to the specimens would be placed in a trust, which Morgan immediately decided would fund their child's education and future scientific scholarships for rural students. With the legal formalities addressed, the scientific work began in earnest. The NASA team carefully examined each specimen, documenting properties with equipment far more sophisticated than anything Dr. Chun had access to at her university. The exobiologist, Dr. Elaine Catry, paid particular attention to the progressive samples Lerner had documented, comparing specimens collected at different times to identify changes. Morgan and James watched the process with fascination, occasionally asking questions or providing information from Lerner's journal entries. Despite their lack of advanced scientific training, the NASA team treated their input with respect, recognizing that their connection to Lerner's documentation provided valuable context. As the morning stretched into afternoon, Dr. Reed's analysis confirmed what Lerner had documented decades earlier. These meteorites contained elemental compositions inconsistent with any known solar system materials. More significantly, some specimens showed evidence of structural reorganization over time, a property that Dr. Catry described as profoundly anomalous for inorganic material. In simple terms, she explained to Morgan and James, these specimens appear to be adapting to Earth's environment, not in a biological sense as we understand it, but through atomic-level reorganization that suggests a form of responsiveness. Like they're learning? James asked, struggling to grasp the concept. That's not quite accurate, but it's not entirely wrong either, Dr. Catry replied thoughtfully. It's more that their molecular structure demonstrates a capacity for change in response to environmental factors. This challenges our understanding of the boundaries between living and non-living systems. Morgan thought again of Lerner's philosophical notes. He had recognized the profound implications of this discovery decades before science had the language or conceptual framework to properly describe it. As the NASA team continued their analysis, Morgan stepped outside for some fresh air. The weight of responsibility momentarily overwhelming. The spring sunshine felt good on her face as she walked slowly around the farmyard, one hand supporting her lower back, the other resting on her pregnant belly. Their simple farmhouse, with its weathered siding and sturdy storm cellar, had been hiding a cosmic secret that might change humanity's understanding of our place in the universe. She found herself at the storm cellar doors, still propped open from their cleaning project that now seemed to have happened in another lifetime. Just days ago, her biggest concern had been preparing a safe space for severe weather as her pregnancy progressed. Now she was helping negotiate scientific access to materials that challenged fundamental assumptions about the cosmos. "You okay out here?" James called, walking toward her from the house. "Just needed a moment," Morgan replied, smiling as he approached. "It's a lot to process." James nodded, taking her hand. Dr. Simmons mentioned they're nearly finished with the preliminary analysis. They want to discuss transportation of some specimens to their lab. Morgan tensed slightly. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing yet. I said we'd discuss it together." He squeezed her hand reassuringly. "This is your discovery too, possibly. More yours than mine since you recognized the significance right away." They returned to the house where the NASA team had compiled their initial findings into a preliminary report. Dr. Simmons presented it with evident excitement. The Lerner collection, as we're now formally designating it, represents the most significant meteorite discovery in modern scientific history, she stated, her professional demeanor barely containing her enthusiasm. "Our preliminary analysis confirms Howard Lerner's observations and goes beyond them with our current technology." Dr. Reed elaborated on the technical findings, explaining that the specimens contained isotope ratios impossible to reconcile with formation within our solar system. These objects originated in another star system entirely, traveled through interstellar space for potentially millions of years, and were captured by Earth's gravity during the 1950s meteor showers Lerner documented. Most significantly, Dr. Khatri confirmed that certain specimens demonstrated what she called environmental adaptation properties, subtle but measurable changes in molecular structure over time in response to Earth conditions. "This challenges our fundamental definitions of life and non-life," she explained. "These aren't biological organisms as we understand them, but they display characteristics previously associated exclusively with living systems, specifically the capacity to respond to and adapt to their environment at a molecular level." The implications were profound. If confirmed through further research, this discovery suggested that the boundaries between living and non-living systems might be more fluid than previously understood, that the capacity for adaptation and response to environment might exist on a spectrum rather than as a binary distinction. "We would like to propose transferring a subset of specimens to our specialized research facility," Dr. Simmons said, presenting a formal request. "The equipment required for comprehensive analysis is simply too large and complex to transport." Here, Morgan and James exchanged glances, having anticipated this request. Attorney Emerson stepped forward with their prepared response. "The Wheelers are willing to allow temporary transfer of selected specimens under specific conditions," she stated. "These include continuous documentation of all testing, regular updates on findings, and the physical return of specimens after analysis is complete." She presented a detailed agreement outlining these terms, including provisions for the Wheelers to visit the research facility and observe testing procedures if desired. Trevor Dawson reviewed the document carefully before nodding his approval. "These terms are reasonable and align with NASA's scientific protocols," he confirmed. "We can certainly work within these parameters." After further discussion, they agreed that 12 representative specimens would be transferred to NASA's Astromaterials Research and Exploration Science Facility, while the majority of the collection would remain secured at the Wheeler farm until a permanent arrangement could be established. As the NASA team prepared the selected specimens for transport, Dr. Simmons approached Morgan privately. "Mrs. Wheeler, I want to express my personal appreciation for how you've handled this discovery," she said with genuine respect. "Many people in your position might have been tempted to sell these specimens to private collectors or use them for personal gain. Your commitment to scientific progress while maintaining appropriate oversight is commendable." Morgan smiled, surprised by the personal acknowledgement. Howard Lerner protected these for decades because he believed they needed to be studied with the right perspective. "I'm just trying to honor that vision." "Well, you've succeeded," Dr. Simmons replied. "And I want you to know that NASA intends to establish the Wheeler-Lerner Research Initiative as the formal program studying these materials. Your name will be permanently associated with this discovery." The gesture touched Morgan deeply. While financial considerations had never been her primary motivation, proper recognition of their role in bringing these materials to scientific attention mattered. As the day progressed, local media began to gather at the end of their driveway, somehow alerted to unusual activity at the farm. Trevor Dawson worked with attorney Emerson to prepare a brief statement acknowledging a scientific discovery of interest, but providing no specific details until the research team had completed preliminary analysis. By early evening, the NASA team had finished their work, carefully packing the selected specimens in specialized containers for transport. Before departing, Dr. Simmons provided Morgan and James with official documentation of everything they were taking, along with security protocols that would protect the specimens during transport and research. "We'll be in touch daily with updates," she promised. "And we've arranged for security to monitor your property with your permission. Once word gets out about this discovery, you may face unwanted attention from media, private collectors, and curiosity seekers." Morgan hadn't considered this aspect, but immediately recognized the wisdom in accepting protection. Their remote farmhouse, normally so private, would soon become a focus of intense interest. After the NASA team departed, taking the carefully selected specimens with them, an unexpected quiet settled over the farmhouse. Dr. Chun and attorney Emerson had also left, promising to return the following day to help manage what would likely become a complex situation as news of the discovery spread. Morgan and James found themselves alone for the first time since opening Howard Lerner's cabinet of cosmic treasures. The remaining specimens sat in their living room, still in the original cabinet but now documented, photographed, and officially recognized as potentially the most significant meteorite discovery in history. "What now?" James asked, settling beside Morgan on their worn couch. "Now we try to process the fact that our lives have completely changed in the span of 48 hours, Morgan replied, leaning against his shoulder. "And we figure out how to balance becoming temporary scientific celebrities with preparing for our baby and running a farm." James laughed softly. "When you put it like that, it sounds impossible." "Maybe," Morgan agreed, "but I keep thinking about Howard Lerner. He managed to balance being a brilliant physicist with living as a reclusive farmer. He recognized the significance of what he'd found, but also understood that some discoveries need time for science to develop the right tools and perspectives to understand them properly." She placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby's movements. "I think there's wisdom in that approach. These meteorites have waited decades to be properly studied. We can take the time to do this right, balancing our responsibility to science with our responsibilities to each other and our child." James nodded, covering her hand with his own. It's strange to think that Lerner probably sat in this very house, maybe even this very room, contemplating these same specimens. Now they'll help reshape scientific understanding, just as he hoped. And our child will grow up knowing that ordinary people in ordinary places can make extraordinary discoveries. Morgan added, that science isn't just something that happens in fancy laboratories or universities, but can begin with someone noticing something unusual while cleaning out a storm cellar. As darkness fell over the Oklahoma plains, Morgan felt a profound sense of connection to the land they farmed, to Howard Lerner's scientific legacy, to the cosmic materials that had traveled unimaginable distances to reach their storm cellar, and to the future their child would inherit. The discovery had thrust them into an unexpected spotlight, but it had also revealed a deeper purpose in their seemingly ordinary lives. Their farmhouse, which had sheltered Lerner's cosmic secret for decades, would now become a different kind of sanctuary, a place where science and everyday life intersected, where the profound and the practical coexisted. Morgan thought of Lerner's journal entry about approaching discoveries with wisdom equal to our curiosity, and felt a renewed commitment to ensuring these materials helped expand human knowledge in the right ways. Outside, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, pinpoints of light from distant suns. Morgan wondered if any of them might be the origin point of the materials now sitting in their living room, cosmic travelers that had journeyed across the void to deliver a message about the universe's complexity and connectedness. We should get some rest, James suggested, noticing Morgan's fatigue. Tomorrow will likely be busy once word starts spreading. As they prepared for bed, Morgan took one last look at Lerner's cabinet, now secured with new locks provided by NASA, the ordinary farmhouse that had felt too small for their growing family just days ago now seemed to contain the universe itself, or at least fragments of its distant reaches, carrying messages about the cosmic connections that bound all matter across unfathomable distances. Whatever challenges lay ahead, media attention, scientific controversies, the practical demands of farm life, preparing for their child, Morgan felt equal to them. If Howard Lerner had found the courage to protect these specimens until humanity was ready for them, she could find the strength to ensure they were studied with the wisdom and perspective they deserved. "Good night, little one," she whispered to her unborn child as she drifted toward sleep. "You're going to grow up in a world where the boundaries between the ordinary and the extraordinary sometimes disappear completely, where cleaning a storm cellar can lead to touching the stars." 3 weeks after Morgan Wheeler discovered Howard Lerner's meteorite collection, the implications of that chance finding had rippled far beyond their Oklahoma farmhouse. What had begun as a simple storm cellar cleanup had transformed into what scientific publications were now calling the Clearwater Discovery, a watershed moment in our understanding of extraterrestrial materials. Morgan stood at the window of their farmhouse kitchen, absently rubbing her now prominent baby bump as she watched a group of graduate students carefully cataloging soil samples near the spot where Lerner had documented his first meteorite recovery. The once quiet farm had become a hub of scientific activity, with researchers rotating through on carefully scheduled visits to study the collection's context and environment. "More coffee?" James asked, coming up behind her with the pot in hand. "No thanks," Morgan replied, gesturing to her herbal tea. "Baby doesn't appreciate caffeine these days." James smiled, glancing out at the activity on their property. "I never thought I'd see the day when people would be excited about our soil samples. Dr. Katri believes the specimens may have left molecular traces in the surrounding environment," Morgan explained, referring to the NASA exobiologist who had become a regular presence in their lives, especially those with the adaptation properties. The past 3 weeks had been a whirlwind of activity and adjustment. After NASA's initial announcement about the discovery, carefully worded to acknowledge the Wheelers' role while emphasizing the scientific significance, media attention had descended upon their small farming community with unexpected intensity. Local news trucks had parked at the end of their driveway for days. National science correspondents had requested interviews. Even international media had reached out, fascinated by the story of a pregnant farmer's wife discovering meteorites that potentially challenged fundamental definitions of life and non-life. Through it all, Morgan and James had maintained a careful balance between cooperation and boundaries. NASA's security team had helped establish a perimeter around their property, ensuring privacy while facilitating controlled scientific access. Attorney Emerson had managed media requests, arranging select interviews that focused on the scientific significance rather than turning the Wheelers into reluctant celebrities. Morgan's pregnancy had become an unexpected symbol in the narrative that emerged, new life preparing to enter the world, just as humanity's understanding of life itself was being expanded by the discovery. Several profile pieces had focused on this poetic connection, though Morgan had insisted that journalists respect her privacy regarding specific details about her pregnancy and their unborn child. The scientific findings themselves had exceeded even initial expectations. The 12 specimens transported to NASA's facility had undergone comprehensive analysis, revealing properties that challenged existing classification systems. Dr. Reed had confirmed that the meteorites originated outside our solar system, traveling through interstellar space before being captured by Earth's gravity, the first confirmed physical samples of interstellar material ever studied. More profoundly, Dr. Catri's team had verified learners' observations about the specimen's ability to undergo structural changes in response to environmental conditions. These weren't the biological adaptations of living organisms, but something more fundamental, matter itself demonstrating responsiveness previously associated only with life. The Clearwater specimens exist in a fascinating middle ground. Dr. Catri had explained during a video conference with Morgan and James the previous week. They're challenging our binary distinction between living and non-living systems, suggesting instead a spectrum of responsiveness that extends deeper into the fundamental properties of matter than we previously recognized. This insight had profound implications not just for meteoritics, but for astrobiology, chemistry, physics, and even philosophy. If matter from other star systems could demonstrate adaptive properties, what did that suggest about the potential universality of lifelike characteristics throughout the cosmos? The sound of a vehicle on the gravel driveway pulled Morgan from her reflections. Through the window, she saw Dr. Chun's university car approaching, followed by a black SUV she recognized as belonging to Dr. Simmons' NASA team. They're early, James noted, checking his watch. The meeting wasn't scheduled until 11. Morgan nodded, feeling a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. Today's meeting would determine the long-term fate of the remaining learner collection specimens still in their possession. After 3 weeks of intensive study, both at NASA facilities and on-site at the farm, it was time to establish permanent arrangements for preservation and research access. As they greeted their visitors at the door, Morgan immediately sensed an unusual energy. Dr. Simmons, typically composed and professional, appeared barely able to contain her excitement. Dr. Chun was similarly animated, exchanging meaningful glances with the NASA team. "We have significant news," Dr. Simmons announced once they were settled in the living room, where the remaining specimens were still secured in Lerner's original cabinet. The preliminary research paper on the Clearwater specimens has been fast-tracked for publication in Science. The peer reviewers called it paradigm shifting and the most significant meteoritics discovery of the century. Morgan and James exchanged pleased glances, gratified that the scientific community had recognized the importance of their discovery. "But that's not why we've come early," Dr. Simmons continued, her voice taking on a tone of barely contained excitement. "Dr. Catri's team made a breakthrough yesterday evening, something so unexpected that we felt it necessary to brief you immediately, before proceeding with any further research." Dr. Katri, who had accompanied the NASA team, opened her laptop and pulled up a series of microscopic images. These are from specimen E7, one of the samples showing the most pronounced adaptive properties. We've been subjecting it to various environmental conditions, different atmospheric compositions, temperature variations, radiation levels, to document its response patterns. The images showed crystalline structures at an extremely magnified level, their patterns shifting subtly across a series of time-stamped frames. 3 days ago, we introduced the specimen to an environment mimicking early Earth conditions: higher carbon dioxide, methane, water vapor, minimal oxygen, Dr. Katri explained. The response was unlike anything we've observed previously. She advanced to the final images, which showed dramatically altered structures, complex, interconnected patterns that reminded Morgan of neural networks. The specimen didn't just adapt to the environment, Dr. Katri stated, her scientific detachment momentarily giving way to wonder. It began organizing itself into structures that demonstrate characteristics we previously associated exclusively with prebiotic chemistry, the precursors to biological life. The implications hung in the air, momentarily silencing everyone in the room. "Are you saying?" Morgan began, instinctively placing a hand on her belly. "We're saying that under conditions similar to early Earth, these interstellar materials begin organizing themselves in ways that could potentially lead to what we recognize as life," Dr. Katri confirmed. "While not biological entities themselves, they may represent a previously unrecognized pathway for the development of lifelike organization. Panspermia," Dr. Chen murmured. "The theory that life, or its precursors, could be transported between star systems via meteorites. Not just transported," Dr. Simmons clarified, "but potentially triggered or catalyzed by these interstellar materials with adaptive properties. If similar materials reached early Earth." She didn't need to complete the thought. Everyone in the room understood the staggering implication that life on Earth might have been influenced or even initiated by interstellar materials similar to those Howard Lerner had discovered and protected. "This is why we came directly to you," Dr. Simmons continued, addressing Morgan and James. "This finding elevates the significance of the Lerner collection beyond even our initial assessment. We're no longer just studying unusual meteorites. We may be studying materials that provide insight into the very origins of life itself." The weight of this revelation settled over Morgan like a physical presence. What had begun as a practical storm cellar cleanup had led to discoveries that might fundamentally alter humanity's understanding of our cosmic origins. The specimens hidden in their farmhouse for decades might contain clues to one of science's most profound questions. How did life begin? What happens now? James asked, his practical nature grounding the conversation. "That's partly why we're here today," Dr. Simmons replied. "Given this development, we believe it's more important than ever to establish proper long-term arrangements for the collection. The research potential has expanded exponentially, requiring specialized facilities and collaborative approaches." Morgan nodded slowly, having anticipated this moment. Over the past 3 weeks, she and James had discussed various options for the collection's future, consulting with attorney Emerson about the legal implications of each approach. "We've been thinking about this too," Morgan said, meeting Dr. Simmons' gaze directly. "And we've reached some conclusions about how we'd like to proceed." She glanced at James, who nodded encouragingly, before continuing. "Howard Lerner protected these specimens for decades because he recognized their significance and wanted to ensure they were studied appropriately. We feel a responsibility to honor that vision while making them accessible to the scientific community." As their daughter grew within her, Morgan embraced this integrated vision, not scientist or farmer, but human being engaged with both cosmic questions and practical realities. The meteorite specimens would soon move to their new home in a specialized research facility, continuing their journey of revelation. But the impact of their discovery would remain, transforming not just scientific understanding, but the Wheeler family itself. The storm cellar, now thoroughly cleaned and properly stocked for the approaching tornado season, stood ready for its original purpose, protecting their growing family from nature's fury. Yet it had served another purpose equally well, preserving cosmic treasures until the right moment for their discovery. What had begun as a practical safety measure had become a portal to understanding humanity's deeper connections to the cosmos. As Morgan stood in the newly prepared nursery, watching James carefully position the meteorite display case on a shelf where their daughter would see it from her crib, she felt a profound sense of connection to the land they farmed, to Howard Lerner's scientific legacy, to the cosmic materials that had traveled unimaginable distances, and to the future their daughter would inherit. "Welcome to the family, Specimen 01, James said with a smile, adjusting the display case to catch the afternoon light. "You've traveled farther than any of us ever will." Morgan joined him, placing a hand on her belly as their daughter kicked energetically. "But not nearly as far as she might go," she replied, imagining the discoveries and possibilities that awaited Alara in a world where ordinary moments could reveal extraordinary truths, where cleaning a storm cellar could connect farm life to cosmic origins, and where the boundaries between the commonplace and the profound sometimes disappeared completely. "The universe," Morgan whispered to her unborn daughter, "is full of unexpected treasures. And sometimes they're hiding right beneath our feet, just waiting for someone to notice." Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.